All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Daily Power Parsha. It is great to see you all. So today is Monday, April 26th, and 2021. And I am excited, not only because of my new glasses, it's great to be able to see, but also because we have a very special week of Torah learning dedicated to a very special, in honor and memory of a very special person. So this week's Daily Power Parsha is dedicated in loving memory of Lillian Lois Sugarman, Leah Bazev Wolf. And we are doing this in honor of Lillian, and of course in her memory, and of course in honor of Ray Bellman, her sister. So Ray, if you can hear us, I hope I didn't cut out again. Can you guys hear me still? Thumbs up if you can. Yes. Okay, good. So this week's Daily Power Parsha, Torah portion of Emor, is sponsored in honor of a loving memory of Ray's sister Lillian. And indeed, may her memory be for a blessing. May her neshama ascend to all of the places where it needs to ascend, but not to go too far. Not to go too out of range. Because the connection, of course, should remain strong. Ray, with you as well as with the whole mishpacha, and she should be a good advocate, as they say in Yiddish, a gute better, a good spokesperson on high for you and for the mishpacha to bring down just torrents of blessings. And
Thank you. I think I'm on my way to the ER. Okay, for me this time.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Okay.
Ray, wishing you only good health and blessings, and I'll give you a call right after the class.
Thank
okay?
You. Yes.
Okay. All right, Ray, feel good.
Thank you.
Nightmare.
Thank you.
All right. So let's jump in. We all hope we're all wishing Ray well and only good health. Okay, let us jump into today's reading. Today's Torah portion, this week's Torah portion is Emor. There's a lot to talk about. Joy mentioned we may be jumping into some hot topics, so let's take a look. Matt, welcome. It's good to have you here, as always. All right, I'm going to share my screen with you, and let us get ready to jump right in. Okay, let's see. Okay, can you see the Torah reading? Did it come up? Yes? Okay. Let's jump in. Leviticus chapter 21. And the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron. By the way, the word Emor, the name of the portion is Emor, as you can see over here, Emor. Emor means speak. So this word right here, speak, God said to Moses, speak to the Kohanim, is Emor. Emor leKohanim, speak to the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, let none of you defile himself for a dead person among his people. In other words, don't become ritually impure by coming in contact with a dead body. This becomes the prohibition that priests have of encountering ritual impurity. Now, here is the important caveat. Obviously, if there's what we call a mace mitzvah, which means a deceased person who needs to be laid to rest, it's a mitzvah to lay the person to rest. And if the only one there is a Kohen, then of course the Kohen does it. But since the Kohen's primary occupation, primary job is to hang out in the temple and do the service, and you can't hang out in the temple and do the service in a state of impurity, the Kohen is instructed here in Torah to avoid as much as possible instances of impurity. Again, this is for back in the day, right? When there was a temple and there was a ritual service in the temple, there was a mitzvah that the Kohanim we're not supposed to encounter impurity. So even till today, some Kohanim don't go to a cemetery unless, again, you have to, but otherwise you try to avoid impurity, even though there's no temple. But the idea is we believe in Mashiach, and Mashiach is coming soon, and you never know when you're going to get a call, to go to the temple. Who knows? Things can turn fast. So it's good to be ready and not in a state of impurity. Except the Torah says the Kohen is allowed to come in contact with the dead body of his relative who is close to him, his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, his brother. So immediate family, one is allowed to come in contact with the dead body because it's family, it's mishpacha, and family is family. And for his virgin sister who was close to him, who was not yet with the man, for her, he shall defile himself. In other words, he is allowed to be involved in the burial or in contact with the body of his sister who is unmarried. The implication is that a married sister who passes away, she has a husband who's going to take care of those arrangements. But if she's unmarried, then the Kohen may have to step in, and the Torah says there's no prohibition for the Kohen to be involved, to touch or to come in contact with his unmarried sister's dead body. And again, even if it's a married sister, but no one else is doing it, of course, the Kohen is allowed to get involved. And it's a mitzvah to get involved. This is, again, if it's not a mitzvah that's incumbent on the Kohen to bury this person, the protocol is the Kohen does not get involved in funerals and burials unless it's immediate family. That's really the key over here. Does that make sense so far? That idea? Okay. So take a look at the next verse, verse 4. But a husband shall not defile himself for a wife who causes desecration while she is among his people. That's a bit of an awkward translation there. Let me see. Pull up my handy dandy edition of the Gutnick edition. Let's see. Oh, okay, got it. I'm going to read to you another version of the translation. A husband should not make himself ritually impure for a wife who violated his sacred character because as a priest he was forbidden to marry her. However, this is only when there are others among the people who consent to her burial. Basically, this is talking about a woman who is prohibited for a Kohen to marry. He marries anyway, so then he shouldn't, again, unless there's other people that cannot, unless no one else can do it, but he should not ideally come in contact with the deceased and the impurity of death with her. That's what it means. And among his people means if there are others among his people who could do it, then great, let them do it. If not, then he should do it, as Rashi says, or as I'm sure it's based on Rashi. Toggle Rashi. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Rashi says again, someone who was unfit, a wife who was unfit for him, based on the various categories, which the Torah will go through. Let's continue. They shall not make bald, the Kohanim, the priests, should not make bald patches on their heads as a sign of mourning, nor shall they shave the edge of their beard as a sign of mourning, nor shall they make cuts in their flesh, all things that people might have done in mourning, in grief. A Kohen is not supposed to do that. The Kohanim, the priests, they shall be holy to their God, and they shall not desecrate their God's name, for they offer up the fire offering of the Lord, the food offering of their God, so they shall be holy. Right? Since they do the holy service, they have to be holy. They can't be in a state of unholiness, in a state of impurity, as defined by Torah. One of the ways of that is come in contact with the dead body. So again, unless it's a close relative or a mitzvah, because no one else can do it, then the Kohen should avoid cemeteries, funerals, burials, etc. Let's continue. The Kohanim, they shall not marry a woman who is a prostitute or who is desecrated, And they shall not marry a woman who is divorced from her husband, for he, the Kohen, is holy to his God. So a Kohen is forbidden by Jewish law to marry what's known as a prostitute, someone who is, someone who would not be of that type of refined character, let's say, or marry someone who is divorced. Why not? What's wrong with marrying someone who's divorced? Again, nothing's wrong with marrying someone who's divorced. A Kohen is not allowed to specifically. Why a Kohen? So I'll give you a an insight that I once heard, and that is that a Kohen, especially Aaron, the Kohen, was all about peace in the family. And so divorce, even if it was amicable, even if it wasn't contentious, it marks a division in the family. And thus the Kohen ideally is not supposed to marry, by Jewish law, not supposed to marry a divorcee. That is Jewish law. In fact, it's the law till today that a Kohen is, and this is something that many Kohanim are careful of, to not marry someone who is divorced. Again, it's not a thing that's across the board. It's specifically for a Kohen. Levites are fine. Israelites are fine. In other words, the 95% of Jews is not a problem. Again, only the Kohen has a specific biblical mitzvah to marry only someone who has not been divorced, someone who has not been married. Verse number 8. You shall sanctify him. He offers up the holy offering of your God. He shall be holy to you, for I, the Lord, who sanctifies you, am holy. So again, held to a different standard, if you will, held to a different familial standard.
Ari.
Yeah, Mark.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
There's a woman I know whose husband was a Kohen, but he passed away. Now she converted before they were married, but I think she converted conservative, not Orthodox. Because of that, he lost his status as a Kohen. Because even for his stone, I said he should have hands put on it, and she told me no. The rabbi said no, I can't do that. So what's the story?
Say it again. Well, what was the last thing that you said? Because of what?
You know, on a headstone, whatever, for a Kohen, hands, like the hands of the Kohen who reaches out to the congregation.
Right.
But the rabbi said, no, you can't do that because he's lost that status.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated with a Kohen. A Kohen has much more restrictions than your average person about who they can marry. Look, it's a complicated subject. When I say complicated, it makes it more difficult for a Kohen. It narrows the pool for a male Kohen who they can marry according to Jewish law. And I mean, I've seen this play out myself. Yeah, I mean, you're raising a story. I've seen this play out, more than once, where this thing has become a challenge. It's also a challenge when a Kohen, a young Kohen, male, young boy Kohen, is not educated about this. And then, let's say, comes to a rabbi and says, "Rabbi, can you, officiate my wedding?" And you look in, as the rabbi, you look into it, and meanwhile, it's one of the, it's not an appropriate marriage for a Kohen based on Jewish law to do. And then you got to break the news. It's like, Yankel, your name is Kohen. It's a little bit tricky here. It becomes a very difficult conversation. So the best prevention, I don't know if that's the right word, but the best course of action is really education. That a Kohen from a young age should know that as a Kohen, you have a very special place in Jewish tradition. You get the first aliyah, you get called to the Torah the first, right? You get to bless the congregation on the Jewish holidays. You get all these cool perks, right? You get upgraded on flights, domestic and international. I'm kidding. I know you got to speak to the airlines about that, right? But you get all these perks, but At the same time, you have there's certain rules and regs that are in Torah. And yeah, it becomes a little bit tricky. So Kohen that violates that, traditionally doesn't get called to the Torah first anymore. It's like it's not an easy thing. It's not.
I mean, I've got a feeling that when they got married, they were members of a conservative congregation, and that's why
I can't weigh in on a specific situation because there's too many factors that I don't know, and what it would just be like. It would be too much like sports talk radio. Like, what if they win? Then who knows, right? Which I love, but it would be too much speculation. But the general thing is that there are definitely some more specific criteria for a Kohen. And yes, traditionally, if a Kohen goes over that line, so to speak, then again, traditionally, as long as they're in that relationship, they're basically, it's like privilege and responsibility. So if the one side is not the way it needs to be, then the privileged side is also not the way it's supposed to be. Now, I don't know if that means that you can't put something on a headstone. I mean, does that, I don't know if, again, I'm not going to weigh in on a specific situation, but
Ari, it's not so much the headstone. I was just surprised he lost his status.
Yeah, but it could even be regained. That's maybe I should add one more thing. If the relationship were to, I'm not weighing in on a specific scenario, but if a Kohen is in a relationship that a Kohen based on Jewish law should not be in, and that relationship ends in whatever way, the Kohen regains their status. It's not like, once it's done forever. It's as long as they're in that, my understanding is, as long as they're in that relationship, it's kind of a disqualification for, they're still a Kohen, but the certain privileges, if you will, of the kahuna, of the Kohanic status, those are kind of suspended, but they can be reapplied. It's not a punitive thing. It's more of like just a natural thing. Again, a Kohen comes with dual roles. There's a kind of, there's perks, but there's also responsibility. So it works both ways. It's kind of like my AAA membership. Yeah. If I don't pay, by the way, I probably need to renew at this point, actually, because I got a call a few weeks ago. Anyway, that's just me. That's a me thing. But if I don't renew my thing, if I'm not paying, then I call them and I'm like, hey, I'm on the side of the road. Can you come help? They're like, I don't know. Are we like, yeah, you gotta have skin in the game to have the other side also. So it's kind of works both ways.
Can a Kohen not marry a convert? Was he not supposed to?
There is, one second. Let me see something here.
Because there's something here in my translation says they shall not marry a woman who is a zona, whatever that is, or a halala.
Yeah,
whatever
halala is desecrate. We need to look that up. Okay. But again, what the specifics aside, there's a certain smaller pool for a Kohen. That's the upshot of all this. Okay. Now and of course, this is referring to specifically a male Kohen who is privy to the temple service. Okay, now let's continue. Now, okay, verse number 9. All right, it's going to be a little bit challenging. If a Kohen's daughter becomes desecrated through adultery, she desecrates her father, she shall be burned in fire. Okay, now here's the thing. The biblical punishment for adultery is a capital punishment. It seems like specifically if it's a Kohen's daughter, instead of stoning, it's burning in fire. The commentators deal with this question: why is the method of capital punishment changed for the Kohen's daughter? There are many different rationales given. I don't recall right now anyone that's compelling enough to share. Rabbi, Rashi doesn't have anything about the fire specifically. Look, it's adultery in Jewish and biblical law is a capital crime, punishable, liable for punishment by death. Only, of course, if there are witnesses and all that stuff. Based, probably is a caveat. That's a long-running caveat. You need witnesses and you need warning in order to actually apply capital punishment. But here, there's a different method. There's something fire. Why? Again, there are commentators that discuss it. Let's see if there's anything here in this one. I don't recall specifically why it is.
Rabbi, I have a question, please.
Fire. Yes.
So what happens to these biblical commands if they can't be, performed under the laws of the country or state you live in?
Yeah, well, you can't do these things without a Sanhedrin, which can't operate without like a majority Jewish rule or a temple. I mean, it's basically precluded from happening nowadays. But I think my understanding is the message still comes through, which is it's a serious deal. In other words, without the application of said penalty, right? And even then, we always have to remember what the Talmud says. Even if one person was put to death by the high court in 70 years, it was considered as if that court had blood on their hands. In other words, people were not being executed left and right on Jewish law. Back in the heyday of the Jewish court, it wasn't happening. Why? Because the standard of evidence and proof and warnings and witnesses, two witnesses, kosher witnesses, it was just astronomically high. Look, we did Crime and Consequence together, I believe, right? We did that course, right? And we had a course on capital punishment. The bar, the stand, I mean, we're speaking about criminal stuff, not necessarily like religious stuff, but it would be the same. The standard of evidence and burden of proof is so high that it essentially almost rules it out from ever being practical. So then what's the point of the law? In other words, what I'm trying to say is your question would even be back in the day when there was a court and it wasn't actually, these punishments weren't being meted out. So then what's the point of having these punishments on the book? And the message, again, my understanding of it is, one way perhaps to understand it is, it evokes the seriousness of the issue. So yeah, even if the punishment's not going to happen, the point is don't do it because it's not a good thing. I think that's what comes through. It's a little bit harsh. I mean, it's a little bit of a strong way to say that. Could have just said it. Nonetheless, my understanding of this, by the way, verse 9, she desecrates her father. Like, what does he have to do with it? Like, either it's a sin or it's not a sin. It is, but what's with the father? I believe that that's connected with the specific method, which is fire. Again, not that it was happening, ever or on a regular basis, but what's the idea? I'm pretty sure that's why, since the father is a Kohen, and a Kohen maybe alter fire or whatever, so therefore somehow it takes on that idea. Again, there are commentators that discuss it, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of the reasoning in that verse. Because she's the daughter of a Kohen, there's a specific form of punishment different than other forms of punishment for other similar cases based on her father's status, something along those lines. Okay, now let's look at verse 10 about the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. And the Kohen who's elevated above his brothers, in other words, not your standard Kohen, but the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, upon whose head the anointment oil has been poured, or who has been inaugurated to wear the garments, right, of the high priest. So he shall not leave his hair unshorn or rend his garments. In other words, no signs of mourning. Hair unshorn means, you let the hair grow long as a sign of mourning, rip the clothing as a sign of mourning. So he should not do signs of mourning. In other words, even when he is in a state of mourning, let's look at Rashi. I think Rashi should clarify this. Even when he is in a state of mourning, he should not do these things as a gesture. Rashi says, he shall not leave his hair unshorn as a gesture of mourning, which means not cutting it more than 30 days. Whoops. All right. I say whoops and because I historically go much longer than 30 days without a haircut, which seems to imply in Torah that was a sign of mourning. But I guess if that becomes your tradition, it's just the way you roll and not a morning thing. I'm not mourning. I'm just not going to the barber that often. All right.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Yeah, it says, yeah, what you said, what Rashi says, what constitutes growth of long hair, not having a haircut for more than 30 days. Well, I did that. 30 days, that's shloshim. Then I cut my hair.
Right.
Then I shaved. So that's standard for mourning, right? 30 days.
That is standard. That is standard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was only saying, because I've gone, as you can probably tell, longer than 30 days here, and often longer than 30 days up there as well.
But that's your normal. What I'm saying is that shloshim, you don't cut your hair for 30 days. But from what I hear, it's okay for the Kohen not to cut his hair for 30 days.
No, the Kohen should not cut his hair for 30 days. Are you with me? The Kohen, right? He should not leave his hair uncut for 30 days. Uncut. In other words,
this is more than 30 days in Rashi. So if it's more than 30 days, shloshim is 30.
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I understand, more than 30 days. Okay. Yeah. Rashi does say more than 30 days. I guess 30 and less, or 29 and less. I'm not sure how, if 30 is counted in the day or not the day, right? It's a good point. But I think the overall energy here is that he's not supposed to be with visible signs of mourning, because he is the Kohen Gadol, the representative of the people in that capacity. And rending his garments, I mean, how is he going to serve as the Kohen Gadol with ripped garments, even if he stayed in mourning? So he could be mourning inside, but the external signs of mourning, he should reduce due to his position. That's what it seems like. Verse 11, he shall not come upon any dead bodies. Again, no contact with a corpse. He shall not defile himself for his father or his mother. Defile himself means become, again, the translation makes it sound like a negative thing. It's not a negative. It means come in contact with the body of his father and mother. So the high priest, again, a regular priest does come in contact with close relatives, but the high priest, even for his father and mother, he should not come in direct contact in the burial of his father and mother, assuming that there are others that can participate in that. Again, let's see if there's some Rashi over here on verse 11. Since the Kohen Gadol, unlike the ordinary Kohen, is forbidden to defile himself for any dead body, even for his parents, this seemingly superfluous statement here comes only to permit him to defile himself for a mace mitzvah, that's what I mentioned before, a dead person for whom there is no one to attend to his burial. So even a Kohen Gadol, even a high priest, if he encounters, let's say he's walking on the road and he encounters a dead body, and there's no one around for a while, so he's not supposed to run away and say, I can't lay the person to rest, give them a burial, become impure, and then roll on with the purification process. And he's pulled out of the temple for a while until he does that process, which takes at least 7 days to do. So when it's a mitzvah, you do it. But again, even close for the Kohen Gadol, even close relatives, father and mother, as harsh as it sounds, if there's someone else that can actually physically do the burying, he's not supposed to physically do that. He could be in the vicinity, and there are certain ways to create like a space, a separate space for him to go. But nonetheless, it shouldn't be direct contact, even for close family. I want to share with you the tradition that's done at the Rebbe's Ohel, at the Rebbe's resting place in Queens, in the cemetery in Queens. So many people go there, including Kohanim. So how do they go there? I think I mentioned this last year, but I'll mention it again. It's been a year. So they made boxes, lightweight boxes that are a certain height above the requisite amount. It's basically, imagine a box without a bottom or without a top. So just 4 walls, a rectangle with 2 handles on the inside. And you basically step in the box and you hold it. Are you with me? You hold the box and you walk through the cemetery, and that creates an isolated space. It's like a mechitza, like a separation you're creating your own little bubble space. So you're not walking through the cemetery. I mean, you are literally walking through the cemetery, but as you are in the cemetery, you're not in the cemetery, you're in a separate space. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Halachically?
No. How can you walk with a box around your feet?
It's not around your feet. It actually goes from the floor till trying to remember how tall it is. Whatever, it's a certain height. I think they actually used to do that, but then they built. I'm actually remembering now. That used to be the protocol, but now they built in the Rebbe's cemetery in Queens. They actually have like a fence that kind of creates a path, a fenced-off path, which creates like a separation between the graves, the actual graves, and the path. So the path is not considered to be a state of impurity for a Kohen. But before they created that path with those walls, not really a wall, but those separations, so they would actually have a box that created a separation. How would you walk with it? You walk with it. It's let's say 4 by 2.
Oh, you mean it didn't have a floor?
No floor. No, that would be like the Flintstones.
Well, what happens when they get to the grave? When they get to the Rebbe's grave?
That's a good question. A tzaddik is considered to be alive even in their death. That's what it says in Jewish law. So a righteous person does not impart impurity. That's what it says. Now, who's a righteous person? Listen, the Rebbe certainly. Who else? Who gets to decide? Where that threshold is? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. But the Rebbe for sure is in that category. That's a guarantee. So once you're there, it's a different space. But even there, also there is the Ola is built. There's like a cement wall around the resting place of the Rebbe and his father-in-law. Give me a second. Let me see if I can share an image. Let me find an image here. See if I can show you the inside of the Ohel Chabad image. Okay, here we go. One second. Why are these pictures so small? Oh my gosh, it's a tiny image. Give me a second here. Hold on. With a large image. And sec. Apologies that this is taking so long. Okay, here we go. You guys are so patient, so quiet. Okay, let me share my screen again. You guys see that? Yeah, that's the on the right side where my mouse is the previous Rebbe's headstone. And this is the Rebbe's headstone. And this is there's a cement wall that surrounds it. And then there's a wall that's kind of like enclosed in an open air kind of building that again is blocked off from the rest of the cemetery. So I think even without the idea of a tzaddik being pure and holy, the idea here is that there's still a separation even once you get in there. All right. Anyway, okay, back inside. Back to verse 12.
Rabbi, excuse me, are the notes ever collected or what is done? The notes that people put in
The
there?
notes are burned, yeah.
They're
every
burned.
once in a while. Yeah, when it gets too much. Yeah. It's a long-standing tradition. Thank you for pointing that out. I just, like, I'm so used to it, I didn't even mention it. The tradition is when visiting a tzaddik's gravesite is you actually write a petition for blessing, like any blessing that you want. The idea is that a tzaddik has connections. So you ask the tzaddik help intercede on your behalf, put in a good word, and then you read the note, you rip it up and you place it by the resting site. And then once in a while, when it gets too much, they burn the notes. It's kind of like people put a note in the Western Wall, like a petition for blessing, in a similar way. I should mention also that if anybody wants to send a note, it could be done online as well. You can write a request for blessing. I do this myself. You can just Google Ohel Chabad, OHEL, Ohel Chabad, and there's a website, and you could send a letter online. There's a form. They print them out, or 24/7 around the clock. They print them out. They take it, they rip it up, and they place it they don't read it because it's anonymous. It's for privacy, whatever. They just print it out and they rip it and they place it by the Rebbe's resting site. So for blessing, for health, or for whatever it is that a person needs, or a loved one needs, it's a way to send in a blessing. Very powerful. Okay, let's do verse number 12. The high priest, once again, he shall not leave the sanctuary, and he will not desecrate the holy things of his God, for the crown of his God's anointing oil is upon him. I am the Lord. Again, it could sound a little harsh, but the idea is that the high priest is not supposed to leave the sanctuary. He's not supposed to leave the holy space. I mean, he leaves the sanctuary, he goes home also, but it means that his space is there and he's not meant to come in contact with ritual impurity. He shall marry a woman in her virgin state. And this means that the high priest is not supposed to marry. Oh, here we go. Verse 14, a widow, a divorcee, a woman who is desecrated, or a prostitute, he shall not marry any of these. Only a virgin of his people may he take as a wife. And he shall not desecrate his offspring among his people, for I am the Lord who sanctifies him. Again, the high priest has even a more narrow pool of wives potential wives to choose from. He cannot marry one who is a widow. I wanted to share with you the most remarkable insight that I've ever seen on this one. Why can't he marry a widow? You want to tell me that a Kohen is about peace, and so a woman who has gone through a bit of challenge in a previous relationship, so it's not the right energy for a Kohen, heart still, maybe not so 100%, comfortable with that, but okay, we hear that. But what about a widow? Her husband died, right? Her husband passed away. So you can't even say that there was a lack of peace in a previous relationship, and so it's not for the Kohen. What's wrong? Why can't he marry a widow? Listen to this. There's a commentary that says that when the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, like we said last week, he would have special powers. If he prayed that somebody should die, or God forbid something should happen to them, that prayer could also have an effect. Imagine if the high priest suddenly takes a liking, has his eye on a woman who's married. He decides he's going to go into the Holy of Holies one year. He's going to pray for her husband's death, and then her husband dies, and now he can marry her, right? The Torah says, nope, no, you can't. You cannot marry a widow, so don't even try it. You with me? This is according to one commentary why the Torah says not that he can't marry a widow, so that he should never be tempted to use any of his spiritual powers to knock off the husband to marry the widow, because he won't be able to marry her anyway. You hear that?
It's because this is what we learned from King David.
Yes, exactly. Well, I mean, that was a story with King David, that he used his sovereign powers to basically knock off the husband, right? Put him on the front lines to marry Bathsheba. So here the Torah, again, according to one commentary, I think it's a very intriguing idea that we're concerned that on Yom Kippur, in the Holy of Holies, what's he thinking about? A woman who's married. Yes, and you know what the message there is? Even a high priest on Yom Kippur in the Holy of Holies is not above distracting thoughts, temptation, etc. That's one of the it's one of the most honest statements of Judaism, which is that a human being is a human being, and there's always the potential for impropriety. And thus, again, according to this one commentary, and I don't remember where it comes from, but I think it's just a really daring idea. Torah says, don't even try. It's not, you won't be able to marry her anyway. Now, how come the Torah didn't say the same thing for a king? And that would have avoided King David's rendezvous? I don't know. All right.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yes.
But what if the Kohen Gadol, in this case, had a brother who was married to a woman, and he was the only brother, and the brother died? Isn't he obligated to marry her?
That's a really good question. I think your question is a Kohen Gadol obligated in Yibum, which is the levirate marriage? Or do we say, no, she was previously married, her husband died, boom, she's a widow, she's in this category. My understanding is that he would not do Yibum. He would not do that. Although it's a mitzvah, this is another mitzvah. Although one might say there's a positive mitzvah and a negative mitzvah, and when they collide, we do the positive mitzvah. So there's a positive mitzvah of Yibum. You know what? Let me see this. Kohen Gadol Yibum. I'm sure Maimonides deals with it. Oh, he cannot perform Yibum. The reason is that while Yibum is a positive mitzvah, it is opposed by the negative mitzvah. Oh, there we go. That's the answer. Okay. So I was going through some scenarios in my head to try to figure out, well, what's the problem? Right? Maybe what Marcus is doing, maybe we could green light this thing. And I'll tell you why I was thinking that, and I'll tell you why ultimately it doesn't work. Give me a second. I want to find the right browser thing to share. Okay, take a look. There is a positive and a negative mitzvah here. The positive mitzvah is he shall marry a woman in her virgin state. In other words, marry a woman who's never been married. That's a positive mitzvah. And a negative mitzvah is, in other words, do not marry a widow. So there's two mitzvot to not marry her, and only one Yibum mitzvah. 2 against 1, 2 override 2 wins over 1. Are you with me? There's one mitzvah that says you should marry the wife of the deceased brother when there are no children. But there's 2 mitzvot that say that he should not marry her because she's, number 1, she's not a woman in a virgin state, and number 2, she's a widow. So the 2 overrides the 1. All right, let's continue. He shall not desecrate his offspring among his people, for I am the Lord who sanctifies him. And what does that mean? Violate the sacred character of his children. I think that means that he should be careful that his children also remain in a state of purity. Okay, where are we with time? Okay, we have a few more minutes. I don't know. Well, a few more minutes till 1. I don't know if that means a few more minutes. But I do want to do a little bit of this. I do want to do the first few verses of this reading until chapter 22. Okay, Leviticus chapter 21. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron, saying, any man among your offspring, the Kohanim, throughout their generations, who has a defect, shall not come near to offer up his God's food. In other words, a Kohen with a physical disability should not be serving, can still do other stuff in the temple, but should not be the one to offer the sacrifices. This is, look, as a rabbi who wrote a book on inclusion, right? There is some hesitation as I read this. Nonetheless, the idea here is that as a representative of the people, these are the criteria that the Torah sets forth. For any man who has a defect should not approach, and here the Torah lists a blind man or a lame one, or one with a sunken nose, or with mismatching limbs, or a man with a broken leg or a broken arm, or one with long eyebrows. You would think that you could probably fix that. I'm sure there are scissors, right? Or a cataract, or a commingling of his eye, commingling in his eye. I don't know what that is, but you probably don't want that, a commingling in the eye. Dry lesions or weeping sores, or one with crushed testicles, Any man among Aaron, the Kohen's offspring, who has a defect, one of these physical disabilities, shall not, and again, long eyebrows. Any man among Aaron, the Kohen's offspring, who has a defect shall not draw near to offer up the Lord's fire offerings. There's a defect in him. He shall not draw near to offer up his God's food. So again, there are plenty of roles for the Kohen, but it's for all Kohanim. But this is the role that is the, I guess, the most forward-facing role of actually being the one to offer up the sacrifice on the altar. That should not be, that should only be one of, I hesitate even to define the term, but not one who has one of these physical disabilities. Any man, no, we just did that. His God's food from the most holy and from the holy ones he may eat, but he shall not come to the dividing curtain, that's the holy space, nor shall he draw near to the altar, for he has a defect. He shall not desecrate my holy things, for I am the Lord who sanctifies them. Moses told this to Aaron and his sons and to all of the children of Israel. So this would again be part of the priestly protocol. If you're a Kohen, what do you need to know? You need to know that avoid funerals and cemeteries. If you're a Kohen, you have to know you can only marry certain people. And if you're a Kohen, you have to know that if you are in a state of physical, blemish, so to speak, then you cannot at that moment serve in the temple. So what that means is if you have a broken leg or broken arm or other things going on, you got to wait till those things heal in order to do those services. Now, what about someone who's blind or lame? So that seems to be something that would be precluding them from ever serving. I think the good news is that today, as we discussed in our first lesson of our JLI course, this can happen. Today, we have the opportunity and the ability to bring sight to those who can't see and bring movement to those who otherwise could not walk. So, what does the third temple look like in that regard? I would hope that it's more inclusive on that level.
What's the story with the eyebrows?
I don't have an insight. If you have an insight, go for it.
I don't, yeah.
I don't, but clearly God is not happy with long eyebrows. Eyelash is one thing, but eyebrows? Come on, bro. Cut those things before you go into my temple, says God. Right? You got to take care of that. What's with the grooming? I don't know. I'm joking, but I wish I had a better explanation of that one. And again, I come at this with a 2021 perspective, I think, with the Jewish perspective, I believe, a strong Jewish perspective and the Rebbe's perspective on inclusion. The Rebbe advocated for people to come into synagogues with guide dogs, those that were seeing impaired, to come to synagogues. People were like, "Oh, guide dogs! It's not bekavadik. It's not honorable for a synagogue." The Rebbe was like, "Don't keep people out of shul." So I believe that there's a way to understand these ideas in a way that's a little bit more inclusive than less, but we have to look a little bit deeper. And unfortunately, I don't have that info on me right now. Okay.
All right.
Yes.
Long story short, I know it said that Moses might have had a cleft palate or a hair lip,
yeah,
which made him blemished.
Yeah,
but he was the Kohen Gadol.
He was not, right?
He was not. So maybe that's part of it. That you can be a leader, but you can't be the Kohen Gadol.
Yeah, for sure. But again, I'm focused even on that narrow space. Again, the Kohen is a Kohen and he can do other things, but he can't be the one to offer up the offering on the altar in these states. And again, that's still cutting out, as narrow as that space is of exclusivity, it's still an exclusive space. And again, it's something that I'm thinking about. And I'll let you know if I find something that I find to be, satisfactory for me. If not, we'll chalk it up to, there's a lot of things that we maybe can't fully, understand, appreciate, wrap our heads around, or, that we struggle with. And that's okay also. It's okay to not, to not have everything perfectly down. So if we got everything perfect, then what would, then where would we go from there, right? Nowhere else to go. All right, I want to wish, Mark, thank you. First of all, thank you. A specific thank you to you for coming up with the idea. I believe it was your idea to that this week should be a tribute in honor of Ray and Ray's sister, and we wish Ray lots of comfort in the passing of her sister, as well as good health and blessings. And we hope to see Ray back on the classes soon. And again, thank you all for being part of it and helping sponsor this in honor of, I'm going to get the name right now to make sure that I got her Hebrew name right, Leah Bas Zev Wolf. Okay. All right. All have a wonderful day. Today is Monday, April 26th. Nothing tonight. So you can get ready for a big week of stuff. And then next Monday night, if you're not yet signed up, then jump in on this. From Auschwitz to the IDF, a story of 3 generations of Jewish heroes, live online on Zoom next Monday night at 8 p.m. with veteran IDF veteran, let me just do it that way, IDF veteran Label Mengel. All right, we'll see you all soon. Oh, and there's so much stuff coming up, a Hebrew course, summer cinema on the Beltline, so many cool things. Check the website for more information. All right, take care all. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.